Welcome to the Kessler Law Firm podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kessler, and I was inspired to talk to you today due to my friend, John Collins. John Collins is a terrific lawyer. He's based in Little Rock, Arkansas. He's one of the smartest lawyers I know, and he's currently the president of the DUI Defense Lawyers Association. Well, he did a podcast the other day. And I got to tell you, I'm still laughing about it. John is a funny guy. John was talking about Arkansas law as it relates to, well, let me just tell you what he said. He said he was walking along on his neighbor's property and he saw his neighbor having his way with a goat. And the neighbor saw him, seeing him having his way with a goat. And the neighbor offered him money if John would just not report it. And John went on to discuss a person's duty in the state of Arkansas when it comes to reporting a crime. Well, things are different in Florida. I'm not here to tell you that the folks that make up our legislature are necessarily any smarter than the folks that make up his. They're just different. But when it comes to this particular kind of activity, in general, it's not illegal in Florida to fail to report a crime, unless, of course, you are a mandatory reporter or if you are concealing a felony. Concealing is the key word there. Of course, there are exceptions, particularly for mandatory reporters and specific kinds of crimes like child abuse and neglect, where the failure to report can have legal consequences. Here's a more specific breakdown. Certain individuals, such as healthcare professionals, teachers, and social workers, are mandatory reporters and have a legal duty to report suspected child abuse, neglect, or sexual battery. Failure to report in these situations can lead to criminal charges. Concealing a felony. Now, if somebody knows about a felony and actively conceals it, they could face criminal charges. Now, in my friend John's example, he was not only not concealing it, he was prepared to report it. And the goat loving friend offered him money not to do it. That's a whole different story. Failing, if John had failed to report it in Florida, if John had failed to report that he saw his Florida neighbor having his way with a goat, John wouldn't be in any trouble. Now, if John helped his neighbor conceal the fact that he was taking liberties with a goat, whether John got money for it or not, John could be in serious trouble. Let's talk about car accidents for a minute. If you're involved in a car accident, in a collision, and there are injuries or even just significant property damage, you're required to report the accident to law enforcement. You're required to stop to remain on the scene, render aid if necessary, and of course, exchange driver information with the owner of the property or the other injured party. Failure to do that could get you charged with leaving the scene of an accident. On TV, they call it hit and run, but in our law books, it's called leaving the scene of an accident, which can be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the damage done. If a person is seriously injured or dead as a result of the accident, the driver who left the scene can be charged with a felony charge. And this has nothing to do with who caused the accident. This is strictly if you know or should have known you were in that kind of an accident. Followers of these podcasts know we just recently had a trial where we defended successfully a woman accused of driving and leaving the scene of an accident. This can be, of course, a very serious charge. Now, making a false report about a crime can also have legal consequences. So if my friend John made up the fact that he saw a neighbor having his way with a goat and John reported that, John can find himself in trouble. Now, in Florida, there's no general law regarding or requiring bystanders to report crimes. So accepting money to not report a crime wouldn't directly violate a law about failing to report. So, unlike Arkansas, if my friend John Collins accepted money just to keep his mouth shut, he would not be committing a crime. However, if the payment involves some sort of threat or coercion to keep someone silent, then it could potentially fall under Florida's extortion laws. Also, if the payment involves money laundering or the use of funds from a crime, it could lead to charges under Florida's Money Laundering Act. So if John threatened his friend and said, "Give me money or I'm going to report it," that's extortion. If the friend said, "Here's 100 if you keep your mouth shut, but I'm going to kill you and your family if you don't," that's extortion too. Now, depending on the circumstances, of course, a person could be charged with crimes like bribery or obstruction of justice if the payment is intended to or does interfere with a police investigation. So let's say that the police come to John Collins' house here in Florida. John makes so much money in Arkansas. Let's say he got himself a vacation home down here. And it was down here that he saw his neighbor having his way with a goat. And John went back in his house, minding his own business, but then the police came calling. And the police said they were investigating a claim that the neighbor had been having his way with farm animals. Well, then, if John were to lie to the police, then John could find himself charged with obstructing justice, resisting an officer, or maybe even being an accessory after the fact. I think John's too smart for that. John's too smart for a lot of things. Then again, John's not too smart for everything. Anyway, to sum it all up, while there's no direct obligation in Florida to report crimes, accepting money to remain silent could expose a person to charges under Florida's extortion or other related offenses. So the smarter thing to do is don't take the money. John, thanks for giving us something to chat about this afternoon. And I'm going to serve the ball back to you. Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Kessler Law Firm podcast. You can find us on YouTube or any other place where you watch podcasts. If you want to make sure not to miss one of mine, then make sure you hit like or subscribe and you'll be all set. And if you'd like more information about us, of course, you're welcome to call us at 772-466-4900 or look us up at www.kesslerlawfirm.com. Thanks again.